Ever since I was a kid, the night always seemed to whisper stories to me, stories that others claimed were just old wives' tales meant to scare children into obedience. But for me, those whispers held a world of fascination, a realm where the line between reality and the supernatural blurred. Among those tales, one haunted me more than the rest, the legend of the Chudail. It wasn't just a story, it felt like a warning. The Chudail, as the legends say, is no ordinary ghost. She's the spirit of a woman wronged, a soul that couldn't find peace in the afterlife and now wanders our world, seeking vengeance. Her favorite haunts, the crossroads, places where paths cross and destinies intertwine, seemed to draw her, making them her hunting grounds. They say she preys on the unsuspecting, on those who, like me, are drawn to the mysteries of the night. I remember the first time I heard about her. It was from my grandfather, a man whose stories were as captivating as they were terrifying. He described her not just as a specter seeking vengeance, but as a sorrowful figure, wronged by those she loved, dying in despair and birthing a legend that would outlive her by centuries. Her feet, he said, turned backward as a mark of her otherworldliness, a sign that she belonged neither to the world of the living nor the peace of the afterlife. That image stuck with me, haunting my dreams and fueling my curiosity. Why did she wander? What was her story? And so, armed with nothing but an insatiable curiosity and a heart that beat for the mysteries of the dark, I set out to uncover the truth behind the legend. Little did I know, the crossroads awaited, and with it, a journey that would blur the lines between legend and reality even further. The day I decided to chase a legend was the same day I realized how much I relied on my two best friends, Arian and Rhea. We'd been inseparable since middle school, a trio against the world. Arian, with his tall, lanky frame and a mop of unruly hair, was the brain of our operations. Always ready with a plan, he had a knack for turning even the most boring afternoons into adventures. Rhea, on the other hand, was the heart. Her vibrant personality could light up the darkest rooms, and her short curly hair was as untamable as her spirit. Despite her fearless facade, she was deeply compassionate, often acting as the glue that held us together. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, I gathered them at our usual hangout spot, an old, abandoned gazebo at the edge of town. "I need to tell you both about something dangerous," I began, watching their expressions change from curiosity to concern. "It's about the Chudail at the crossroad. I want to go see if the legend is true." I expected hesitation, maybe even outright refusal, but Arian's eyes sparkled with intrigue, and Rhea, ever the brave soul, simply nodded. "We're with you," they said in unison, their loyalty warming my heart. Equipped with a camera and flashlights, we set out under the cloak of night, the air thick with anticipation. The crossroad was shrouded in fog, a blanket of mist that seemed to swallow the beams of our flashlights whole. Silence enveloped us, so dense it felt like we were walking through a dream. Then, without warning, the air shifted. A cold wind sliced through the fog, sending shivers down my spine. That's when we saw her, a figure emerging from the mist. She was beautiful, in an ethereal, almost otherworldly way. Her long, flowing dress clung to her form, moving gracefully with each step she took. Her hair cascaded down her shoulders like a waterfall of ink, and her face. It was mesmerizing, capturing the very essence of the night. But it was the shadow she cast that sent a jolt of fear through me. It was wrong, twisted in a way that defied nature. Her silhouette revealed long hair and a figure that was unmistakably female, but her feet, they pointed backward. In that moment, every warning, every whispered tale about the Chudail became terrifyingly real. Arian's hand tightened around his flashlight, his knuckles white in the dim light. Rhea stood, frozen, her breaths coming in short gasps. We were caught in the grip of fear, yet rooted to the spot by a mix of awe and curiosity. The figure stopped, her gaze locked onto ours, a silent challenge hanging in the air between us. The legend of the Chudail was no longer just a story, it was our reality. And as we stood there, at the crossroad between myth and madness, I couldn't help but wonder if some legends were better left unexplored. The moment our eyes locked with hers, the world seemed to pause, a breath held too long in the quiet before a storm. Then she moved. Not as humans do, but with an eerie, fluid grace that seemed to cut through the fog like a whisper turned into motion. It was mesmerizing, terrifying, and utterly unnatural. "Run!" I heard myself shout, the word ripping from my throat before my mind could catch up with the fear that spurred my legs into action. Aryan and Rhea needed no second warning. We turned as one, our feet pounding against the damp earth, the fog swirling around us as if trying to slow our escape. Her laughter followed us, a sound that shouldn't have belonged to the beautiful figure we had seen. It was haunting, filled with a sorrow so deep it echoed across the empty fields, turning the night air cold with its malice. The sound seemed to come from everywhere, enveloping us, chasing us just as surely as the figure from whom it emanated. Glancing back was a mistake. In that fleeting look, I saw her true form revealed by the moonlight that dared to pierce the fog. Her beauty was a mask, her face contorted in rage, her eyes hollow pits of despair, and her feet, twisted backward, dragged across the ground in a mockery of human motion. Aryan gasped, his breaths ragged as he pushed through the fear, his usually calm demeanor shattered by the terror of our chase. Rhea, always the brave one, let out a determined cry, urging us to move faster, her voice a beacon in the night that pulled us forward. We didn't stop, not even when the lights of our town came into view, not until the safety of street lamps bathed us in their warm glow. Only then did we dare to halt, our breaths coming in heavy gasps, our bodies trembling not just from exertion, but from the raw fear that clung to us like the mist we had escaped. The laughter had ceased, the night once again silent except for our panting breaths. We leaned on each other, a tangle of arms and wide eyes, the reality of what we had encountered pressing down on us with a weight heavier than the night air. "We saw her, the Chudail," Rhea whispered, her voice breaking the silence, a mix of awe and horror in her tone. Aryan nodded, his eyes scanning the darkness as if expecting the figure to emerge at any moment. "We need to get home," he said, his voice steady but carrying an undercurrent of fear we all felt. As we made our way back, the night seemed to watch us, the legend of the Chudail now a part of our own story. The chase might have ended, but the memory of that night would haunt us, a reminder of the thin veil between legend and reality, and the darkness that dwells just beyond the safety of the light. The night after our terrifying encounter at the crossroad, none of us could sleep. Aryan, Rhea, and I huddled together in my living room, a fortress of blankets and pillows around us, as if they could shield us from the memory of what we'd seen. The image of the Chudail, with her backward feet and haunting beauty, was etched into my mind, refusing to fade away. As dawn broke, painting the sky in soft hues of pink and orange, a restless energy took hold of me. I couldn't shake off the feeling that there was more to the Chudail's story than just the whispers of a vengeful spirit. Driven by a mix of fear and fascination, I turned to the old, dust-covered books my grandfather had left me. They were filled with tales of spirits and legends, including the Chudail. Aryan, ever the strategist, suggested we also search online, cross-referencing the folklore with any historical records we could find. Rhea, with her unwavering courage, encouraged us to speak to the villagers again, hinting that understanding might be the key to overcoming our fear. The more we learned, the more the Chudail's story unfolded before us like a tragic tapestry. She was once a woman of flesh and blood, wronged not by strangers but by those she called family. She died in childbirth, a moment that should have been filled with joy, turned into her eternal agony. Bound to the crossroad, her spirit sought not just vengeance, but justice for the wrongs done to her. Guilt gnawed at me as I realized the weight of our intrusion. We had sought her out as an adventure, a tale to tell, without considering the pain and suffering that had birthed the legend. Arian, usually so composed, admitted feeling a deep unease, questioning the ethics of our curiosity. Ria, her eyes filled with a newfound resolve, spoke of redemption, not just for us, but perhaps for the Chudail herself. Our adventure had turned into a quest, not for thrills, but for understanding. The Chudail, a figure of terror in our minds, had transformed into a symbol of the injustices women have faced throughout history, silenced even in death. We couldn't undo the wrongs of the past, but we could acknowledge them, remember them. That night, as we sat together, a silent pact was formed among us. We would tell her story, not as a tale of horror, but as a reminder of the scars left by injustice. Our encounter at the crossroad had changed us, binding us to the Chudail not through fear, but through a shared desire for her story to be heard, for her seeking of justice to be understood. And perhaps, in our small way, we could offer her spirit a semblance of peace. The morning after our night of revelations about the Chudail, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had to do something. It wasn't just about our fear anymore, it was about finding peace, both for us and for her. I shared my thoughts with Arian and Ria over breakfast, and it didn't take much to convince them. We were in this together, from the start to the end. Our first stop was the local temple, where we sought the wisdom of an elderly priest, known in the village for his deep knowledge of ancient rituals and the supernatural. His small, dimly lit room was filled with the scent of incense, and walls adorned with faded paintings of deities. As we explained our encounter and intentions, his eyes bore into us with an intensity that made me shift uncomfortably in my seat. "The Chudail," he began in a voice that seemed to echo the depth of his years, "is a spirit with powers that are both feared and respected. She can appear in any form, deceive the human eye, and her wrath can bring about calamities." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. I remembered our research, the countless stories on the internet about her abilities to manipulate perceptions, to haunt those who dared to cross her path. "People have sought protection from her wrath through the centuries," he continued, his hands tracing the edges of an ancient text. "Amulets, sacred chants, and rituals to honor her spirit, to seek her forgiveness, have been passed down through generations." He looked at us, his gaze softening. "It's not just about warding off her anger, it's about understanding her pain, acknowledging the wrongs that tether her to this world." With his guidance, we prepared. Offerings of flowers, incense, and a small bowl of milk, traditional symbols of peace and appeasement, were gathered. He taught us sacred chants, words that felt ancient and powerful as we practiced them, a connection to a world beyond our understanding. As dusk approached, we found ourselves once again at the crossroad, the scene of our terrifying encounter. The air was thick with anticipation, the setting sun casting long shadows on the ground. Armed with our offerings and the chants, we stepped into the heart of the crossroad, a silent agreement among us that there was no turning back. The priest had warned us that the ritual would not force the Chudail to leave, but was an offering of peace, a request for her to find solace. As we began, the familiar fog started to roll in, and a chill wind whispered through the trees. But this time, we were not afraid. We stood together, united in our purpose, reciting the chants with a conviction that filled the air around us. We didn't know if the Chudail would accept our offering or if our efforts would make any difference. But in that moment, it didn't matter. We were not just confronting a legend. We were acknowledging a pain that had been ignored for too long, offering our respect to a soul that had been wronged. And perhaps, in doing so, we were taking the first step towards finding our own peace. Under the cloak of a new moon, the world around us felt suspended in time, as if the night itself was holding its breath. There we stood, Arian, Ria, and I, at the heart of the crossroad, the very place where reality had once twisted into nightmare. The air was thick, charged with an anticipation I could almost taste. As we began the ritual, the world seemed to fade away, leaving us in a bubble of our own making, a sacred space where only we and the Chudail existed. The offerings lay at our feet, symbols of peace and understanding, as we recited the ancient chants taught by the priest, our voices steady in the stillness of the night. Then she appeared. The Chudail, more menacing than ever, materialized from the shadows, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. But this time, there was something different. As we continued our chants, a strange calm settled over me, a stark contrast to the fear that had once consumed us. Suddenly, the air around us shimmered, and visions began to unfold like scenes from a forgotten play. We saw her life, a tapestry of joy and sorrow, love and betrayal. There she was, a young woman with dreams in her eyes, laughter on her lips, surrounded by the warmth of family. But as the scenes shifted, so did the light in her eyes. Betrayal darkened her doorstep, her love turned to ash, her trust shattered by those she held dear. The final scene was the most heart-wrenching of all, her death, alone and in despair, a life snuffed out too soon. With each vision, my heart grew heavier, an ache of empathy for the woman she once was. The Chudail's story, her pain, her anger, was no longer a tale of terror, but a tragic saga of loss. Arian and Rhea stood beside me, their faces etched with the same realization that gripped my heart. We were not just witnessing the tale of a vengeful spirit. We were being shown the depth of human cruelty, the kind that leaves scars so deep they transcend death itself. The visions faded, and we were once again at the crossroad, the Chudail before us. But the air had shifted, the menacing aura that had surrounded her seemed to lessen, as if our understanding, our empathy, had bridged a gap centuries in the making. We didn't know if our efforts would change anything, if the ritual would bring her peace. But in that moment, it became clear that this confrontation was not about us versus her. It was about acknowledging her pain, about offering solace to a soul wronged by the world. It was a battle, yes, but not of wills. Rather, it was a plea for forgiveness, an offer of understanding from the living to the dead. And as the final chants echoed into the night, I couldn't help but wonder if, in seeking to appease the Chudail, we had also begun to heal ourselves. As the last words of the chant faded into the night, an eerie silence enveloped us. Arian, Rhea, and I stood motionless, our breaths shallow, as we watched the transformation unfold before our eyes. The menacing figure of the Chudail, which had loomed over the crossroad like a specter of vengeance, began to change. Her once terrifying form softened, the harsh lines of anger and sorrow melting away to reveal a glimpse of the woman she once was, a hint of peace replacing the turmoil that had twisted her features. For a moment, it seemed as if time itself had paused, allowing us a brief connection to a spirit bound by centuries of pain. Then, with a final whisper that seemed to carry the weight of unspoken apologies and long-forgotten dreams, she vanished into the night, leaving behind a palpable sense of relief that washed over us like a gentle wave. The crossroad, once a nexus of fear and legend, now lay silent and unassuming under the moonlit sky. The curse that had haunted this place, that had drawn us into a journey none of us could have imagined, was lifted. But as we turned to leave, a part of me hesitated, a nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach. I knew, as did Ariane and Rhea, that our encounter with the Chudail was more than just a tale of spirits and rituals. It was a lesson in empathy, a reminder of the pain that lingers when injustice is left unaddressed. Yes, the Chudail had disappeared, her spirit seemingly appeased, but the stories of those like her, the wounds they carry, never truly leave. As we walked back, the crossroad fading into the distance, I couldn't help but feel a mix of sadness and hope. Sadness for the countless stories of sorrow that dot our world unseen and unheard, but also hope that by acknowledging these stories, by lending our voices to those who have been silenced, we might pave the way for healing, not just for the spirits of the past, but for the living as well. The crossroad, was just a crossroad now, but the journey it had set us on was far from over. Arian, Rhea, and I had started as mere seekers of the unknown, driven by curiosity and the thrill of adventure. But we ended as keepers of stories, of truths that demanded to be heard and understood. And as the first light of dawn began to break over the horizon, I realized that our true journey had just begun. A journey not of confronting spirits, but of confronting the realities of our world, armed with the understanding that sometimes the most powerful magic lies in empathy and the willingness to listen to the whispers of the past. The journey back home felt surreal, as if Arian, Rhea, and I were returning from a world far removed from our own. The crossroad, with its eerie silence and whispered legends, now felt like a distant memory, yet the experience was forever etched in our minds, a constant reminder of the night we faced the unknown. Sitting at my desk, the glow of the computer screen illuminating the room, I began to write. Words flowed from my fingertips, a torrent of emotions, fears, and revelations. I wrote about the legend of the Chudail, of her pain and our journey to understand the depths of her sorrow. I wrote about Arian's strategic mind, always thinking, always planning, about Raya's bravery and her unwavering spirit, about the night that changed everything. As the story took shape on the screen before me, it became more than just a recounting of events. It was a tribute to the spirit we had encountered, a promise to remember her story and the lessons it taught us. But it was also a cautionary tale, a reminder that the world is filled with stories waiting to be heard, some beautiful, others tragic. I ended the story with a warning, a piece of advice that had been passed down through generations but now held a new meaning for us. Always beware the crossroad, for it is at the crossroads where paths converge, where the veil between worlds is thinnest, and where, if you listen closely, you might hear the whispers of those who walk between. As I hit the publish button, sending our story into the world, I leaned back in my chair, a sense of accomplishment mixed with a touch of melancholy washing over me. We had done our part, shared our tale, and perhaps in doing so, offered a voice to the voiceless. The legacy of the Chudail, and the lessons she taught us, would continue. Through our story, her tale would live on, a beacon for those who sought to understand the mysteries of the past and the spirits that linger in the shadows. Arian, Rhea, and I had started this journey as mere spectators, curious about the legends that haunted our world. But we ended it as storytellers, guardians of the tales that weave the fabric of our reality. And as I closed my laptop, the first light of dawn creeping through the window, I knew that our adventure was just the beginning. For in a world filled with legends and myths, the legacy of the crossroad was a reminder that there is always more to discover, always more stories waiting to be told.